Imagine standing before a city protected by walls so massive that no army had ever broken through them. The gates were tightly shut. The soldiers stood ready for battle. By every human measure, victory was impossible. But what if the greatest weapon wasn't an army or a sword, but simple obedience to God? This is the incredible story of how the mighty walls of Jericho came crashing down. After 40 years of wandering in the wilderness, the Israelites were finally standing on the edge of the land God had promised them. Their new leader, Joshua, had taken Moses' place, and the people were ready to begin a new chapter. But one enormous obstacle stood in their way: the city of Jericho. Jericho was one of the strongest fortified cities of its time. It was surrounded by enormous stone walls, built so high and thick that they seemed impossible to overcome. The gates were locked, and the people inside were prepared for war. The Israelites had no siege towers, no battering rams, and no advanced weapons that could bring those walls down. From a human perspective, there was no way to win. But God had a different plan. The Lord spoke to Joshua and gave him instructions unlike anything a military commander had ever heard. Instead of attacking the city, God told Joshua to have the soldiers march around Jericho once each day for 6 days. At the front of the procession would be armed soldiers. Behind them, 7 priests would carry ram's horn trumpets. Following the priests would be the Ark of the Covenant, a symbol of God's presence among His people. More soldiers would walk behind the Ark. There was one unusual command: no one was allowed to shout, no one was allowed to speak. Only the sound of the trumpets would echo around the city. Joshua trusted God completely. The next morning, the Israelites formed the procession exactly as God had instructed. They marched around the city one time in complete silence. The people of Jericho watched from the top of their walls, confused by what they were seeing. Instead of launching an attack, the Israelites simply finished their march and returned to their camp. The same thing happened on the second day. Then the third, the fourth, the fifth, and the sixth. Day after day, the silent procession continued. The people inside Jericho must have laughed, mocked, and wondered what the Israelites were doing. To them, it probably looked foolish. But faith often looks strange to those who don't understand God's plan. Then came the 7th day. Before sunrise, Joshua gathered the people once again. This time, God gave a new instruction. Instead of marching around the city once, they would march around it 7 times. Around and around they walked, 1 lap, then another, then another. The tension grew with every step. Finally, after completing the 7th lap, Joshua gave the signal. The priests blew their trumpets with all their strength. Joshua shouted, "Shout, for the Lord has given you the city." At that very moment, thousands of voices cried out together. Then something impossible happened. The mighty walls of Jericho shook violently. The ground trembled beneath everyone's feet. Massive stones cracked apart. Towering walls that had stood for generations suddenly collapsed into heaps of rubble. The impossible fortress was open. The Israelites charged straight into the city exactly as God had promised. Jericho had fallen, not because of military power, but because God fought for His people. Before the battle, Joshua had given one important command. The Israelites were not to take treasure for themselves because the city had been devoted to the Lord. Only Rahab and her family were to be spared. Rahab had once hidden the Israelite spies and trusted in the God of Israel. Because of her faith and courage, she and her entire family were rescued before the city was destroyed. It was a beautiful reminder that God's mercy reaches those who place their trust in Him. The victory at Jericho became one of the greatest miracles in Israel's history. It proved that no wall is too strong, no obstacle is too great, and no problem is too impossible when God is leading the way. The story of Jericho teaches us that faith is not just believing God can do the impossible, Faith is choosing to obey Him, even when His instructions don't seem to make sense. The Israelites didn't win because they had the strongest army. They won because they trusted the One who was stronger than every wall they faced. Maybe you're standing before your own Jericho today. It could be fear, doubt, sickness, financial struggles, or a challenge that seems impossible to overcome. Remember this story. The same God who brought down the walls of Jericho is still able to make a way where there seems to be no way. If this story encouraged you, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications.